All right, good morning, everybody. How are you doing today? Today, I'm going to be joined with Geoff King. He's jumping on right now. We're going to be discussing best practices for how to get your buyer's offer accepted in this market. Geoff's going to be touching on this. Geoff's a realtor. He's in the field, writing a lot of offers, getting a lot of offers accepted with buyers right now. And if you think about it, this market right now, from a listing perspective, is not a skill-based market, meaning that the skill set required to sell a house right now isn't that high. You put a house on the market, you price it somewhat competitively, it's going to sell immediately, most likely with multiple offers. It's not a market like 08 or 09 where you have to have conversations with your sellers every single week and homes are sitting for 30, 60, 90, 120 days. Now, it's not a skill-based market for listings. On the flip side, it's a very skill-based market when working with buyers, because for every single house you go and show, there's 50 other people showing that house. If you're going to write an offer, you're competing against 2, 3, 20, 50 other offers, sometimes more. So you have to know what to do to be competitive to get offers accepted in this market right now. It's not just submit an offer at list price or over asking price. Don't call the realtor, just send it off, pray that they see it, hopefully it gets accepted. There are things you can be doing that Geoff's going to talk about to set your buyer up strategically to get an offer accepted. So Geoff, give a little quick background on yourself. How long have you been in the industry? How long have you been doing this?
Yeah, so I just finished up my 4th year, so I am in my 5th year of real estate now. And this market is drastically different than anything else, even in the short amount of time that I've been in it. It's totally different than when I started.
Absolutely. How has it changed?
So basically in the beginning, you didn't have a bunch of multiple offer situations. Like you would maybe have 1 or 2 offers on a couple of houses, but a house would still potentially be on the market for like 2 weeks, and we would be okay with that. Like that would be a priced right house. It would be a good house. If it went under contract within 14 days of being on the market, it was still very good. Now it's like first weekend. You have 1 weekend to get your buyers in there, and you need to get them in there as quickly as possible, because typically the first offer on the table is usually the best offer on the table. At least that's in my experience what I've been running into. And that's what I try to definitely impress upon the buyers, like the urgency and being very proactive. You didn't have to do that as much as you do right now. And if you're not being proactive and you're not being first, you're already behind. And that's drastically different than when I had first started, because we would have time to go see a house. Typically, we would be like the only offer on the table. I mean, I remember writing offers like under the listing price and then negotiating and being able to close for $5,000 under. And it's just like, I can't remember the last time that I've been able to do that, at least in the last probably 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, it's changed, right? I would say since, sorry, I just dropped my pen. I would say since COVID started in 2020, March, April of 2020 is when we started to see this uptick of a little bit lower inventory, you have to get a little bit more aggressive, definitely toward the end of 2020 for sure. So since the market's changed, Geoff, what are you doing differently? Or let me ask you this. Are you doing to set expectations for buyers? Because I think that's an important thing that a lot of people aren't doing. They're not setting the correct expectations for buyers to know exactly what this market entails right now, letting them know how low of inventory we have, preparing them that they may need to pay over list price in order to get the home sold. They may need to do some other things within the terms. Are you doing buyer consultations with all of your buyers before you take them out and show them houses?
Yes, absolutely. And that's where it all begins, is you have to have a really solid buyer's consultation and really explain to them the difference of maybe the last time, especially with somebody that's bought a house before, the last time that they bought a house, if that was 4 or 5 or 6 or more years ago, we're not in the same market. We're not in the same situation as we were then. And with first-time buyers especially, it's the matter of we can write a lot of offers, but I always frame it as if we're up against 10 other offers, the first place offer is the one that gets the house. 2nd through 10 get absolutely nothing. And so that's the difference. And the key now is that you can write a lot of offers and you can get into the top 3 usually. And if you're not first, it doesn't matter. You're going to be out there the next weekend looking and showing houses. And so to me, the most important thing that I talk to them about up front, especially, is their financing. The financing has to be done ahead of time. We can't get into a situation where we don't have a solid pre-approval, or it's just the generic pre-approval that they go off of, like the verbal income that they make and all the questions that they ask in the application. Like, get all of the paperwork to your lender, whoever that is, and get the buyer at least through the underwriting process so that their credit score is checked, their income is actually verified, their assets, their cash in the bank is actually verified. It's not just the verbal. And if your lender doesn't do that or doesn't want to do that, find a different lender, because you have to be as proactive as your lender is going to be in order for them to actually close on the loan. And right now we're fortunate because we work with a great lender at USA Mortgage where we're able to close a conventional loan in 3 weeks. Like normally it's, oh, well, 30 days, 30 days is what we need. Like, how do you set yourself apart in a market where basically everything has changed? We have to be extremely aggressive. We have to have the best terms. We have to have the best price. And if we don't have the best of everything, we're not going to get the house. So it all begins with that lender conversation, getting the buyer completely pre-approved, get them all of the information that they need so that literally the only thing that your lender should be really needing and asking for, honestly, is the appraisal if they're getting a loan that needs to be appraised.
So, okay, so during the buyer consultation, you're making sure all of their financing set up, all of their financing secure. They're not just giving verbal. It's they're underwritten essentially in a sense where they're fully pre-approved. What are you doing to show them that, to prepare them for the fact that they may need to pay over list price potentially?
Absolutely. So the next step that we take is after financing is taken care of, the next step is to look more in depth at the houses that they're interested in looking for. So we're going through, we're talking about, I like to use the 80-20 rule. If you're finding 80% of the things that you want in the house, that's the house for you. If you're trying to find 100% of everything that you want in this house right now, you better go build it and you better have an unlimited budget. Yeah. And even if you build it, you better be ready to wait a year in order to get that house. So that's setting level expectations. And I try to compare and contrast the difference between when I first started versus what the market is right now. Because you could build a new house in 3 months and everything was typically fine. But if that's the case right now, you're looking at a year. And so when we talk through different things about the market, especially pricing, I pull up the areas that they're interested in and we're looking at a couple of things. I look at the list to sale price. And the list to sale price specifically, not the number really is irrelevant. The percentage is what matters. Because if we're in an area where the houses that are selling, and you can do this by school district, you can do this by zip code, however they want to search, it really should be all the same. You look at this list to sale price. And if the list to sale price in that specific area is 106%, or it's 108%, or it's 112%, or it's 115%, you and your buyer need to know that going into the area. Because I always try to tell them is that the list price right now doesn't mean that's what the house is actually worth. The list price, and especially we do it on the sell side, we list intentionally, very attractively in order to get more offers. And what I mean by that is we might be slightly under what the house would sell for in order to drive interest, in order to drive traffic, because it's a great marketing tool. You're picking up buyers, you're picking up sellers, you're getting into multiple offer situations, and people are willing to pay more for a house if they know that other people want it. And so depending on those numbers, if it's 110%, call it, we need to know that if we're looking at a $250,000 house, 10% over that's going to be $25,000. And this is where I always go back to, don't just tell your buyers, oh, we can offer $10,000 more and we might get that house. You might, but you also might be on the bottom of the pile if you don't know what the numbers are of what the houses are selling for in the area. So we look really intentionally at comparables. We look at the percentages, and then we look and see if they're only approved for $250,000, we're not going out there and looking at $250,000 houses. That's the number one thing that I see a lot of agents do too, is we want to go look at the top of our price range. If you're writing $250,000 on a house that's listed at $250,000, chances are very good that you're probably not going to get it. So you need to add that buffer in, and you should potentially be looking in that $200,000 to $225,000 range. That way, if they find something they absolutely love, they can go up to $250,000 in order to compete for it. So we have all of these conversations. And basically what I do is I just lay out different scenarios, because they're not going to remember them, and that's okay. The point is that we've talked about them, they've been exposed to them. So it's not like the very first time that they're hearing it when we're standing at a house and they're like, I love this house. And they're only willing to go $10,000 over to get it, which may not actually get the house. To me, all of the buyer heavy lifting, all of the buyer prep work should all be done before you're going and looking at houses. Mm-hmm. And it's really like putting together a game plan, and you're putting together a strategy in order for them to go and get the house. Because the only other thing that's going to happen is that you're going to show them, 3 houses on a weekend, you're going to write an offer, not going to get it. Show them another 3 houses the next weekend, write an offer, not going to get it. This could happen 4 or 5 times. And it's a lot of unfortunately, it's a lot of disappointment in most cases. And eventually, if they get to the point where they're discouraged, you're not going to sell them a house. They're going to go rent, or they're going to stay where they're at and they're not going to sell. So being very strategic around buyers. I've never been this more strategic than I am right now with buyers, just because it's going to take a lot of time if you don't do things right in the very beginning.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I think for a lot of people too, especially in years prior, the buyer consultation wasn't important to them. It's always been important. You should always do them. But for a lot of people, it was just like, it wasn't as important to a lot of people as it is today, because we have to really be overeducating our buyers to prepare them for what's ahead in this market right now. And it wasn't like in years past where you could go out and look at 5 houses and you had a weekend even to think about it. You could still write an offer and it would still be there. It's, we need to go out, and if you like a house, we need to be prepared to write the best offer possible. And here's why, to educate them on that. So that's good. So you're educating them up front, giving them, you made some good points there, list to sale price for in the ratios for in the areas, letting them see that people are paying over list price. So they need to be prepared for that. Fully pre-approved with the lender. Short closing times as well. So short closing times can be good or can be bad, depending on, and we'll talk about this a little bit when you have a conversation with the realtor. Not all sellers want a 3-week closing. Right. If the house is vacant, the seller's already moved out, 3-week closing can be very attractive. If someone's been there for 50 years and they've got tons of junk they need to move out, 3-week closing might be overwhelming. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. So, okay, so you do a good job of getting them teed up. Now you're going out and showing them a house they find one they like. What's that conversation look like for them? They're ready to write an offer.
Absolutely. So after we've done basically all the prep work, we know the area, we know the house, we know what houses are selling for around there. We're standing in the front yard, and I asked them, I said, how bad do you want this house? Like, that's the question that you need to ask. It's not a situation where it's like, well, do you want to write an offer? If you just want to write an offer for the sake of writing an offer, you're wasting everybody's time right now. Do you want this house? And if the answer is yes, I absolutely want this house, like this is the house for me, then you know that you need to do everything possible in order to get it. So say that's this scenario. So as soon as they say, yes, I want this house, I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling the agent while I'm still standing in the front yard, like with them next to me. And what I'm asking them, I'm going to ask them a couple of things. Say, hey, we're at your listing at 123 Main Street. I have an interested buyer. We're looking at writing an offer. How many offers do you have on the table? Notice I didn't say, do you have any offers on the table? Because do you have offers is yes or no. That could be 1, that could be 20. So you need to ask, how many offers do you have on the table? Sometimes they'll tell you, sometimes they say, I don't know. Sometimes they say, well, we just keep having them come in, which is fine. So in the scenario though, where we are in a multiple offer situation, they say we've got, 6 offers on the table. Great. Are those offers over the asking price? You're not asking, what are those offers? How much are those offers? Are those offers over the asking price? 99 times out of 100 right now, the answer is going to be yes. But you've done 2 things. You've called the buyer, you're standing next to the buyer, you've called the listing agent, and you're having this conversation, and your buyer's listening to you, obviously, because they're interested and they want to know. Because this helps you in 2 ways. It helps the buyer validate that more people are interested in this house. So that's the first thing. I'm not the only buyer that wants this house. So that's a good thing. It's very, very good for their confidence level to be going into that situation and know other people want the house. The other is you're talking to the listing agent, you're opening up lines of communication. So then I follow up with questions about what are the most important things to this seller outside of money, because we know money is typically going to be the number 1 most important thing. And so like in the scenario where you just said, Michael, that, it's not always that they want 3 weeks closing. They might want a longer closing. They might need 45 days, or they might need 60 days. And so I always ask, what is your seller's preferred closing date? If they don't have a preferred date, or they don't have, a week or a number of days, then you need to ask them, would they prefer a shorter closing, or would they prefer more time to be able to get out of the house? Obviously, if the house is vacant and there's nothing in there, the answer is going to be they want to close as soon as possible. And so I always bring up a 3-week closing, especially if you've got buyers that are on a conventional loan, because you need to be prepared to go up against buyers that are offering cash for that house. They could close in 2 weeks if possible. And so I always ask about closing date. The next thing that I ask about is, are there any specific terms that your buyers would like to see in their offer? And this could be something as simple as, yes, they want an as-is sale. They want it as clean as possible. They don't want to do anything with the house. They just want to close on the house. And that's what I'm trying to get the buyers to also agree with too, because that's the smoothest way to the closing table. And so if there's a scenario where they have a bunch of things in the house and they're like, oh, I'm worried about moving out all of this furniture, they need more time to, sell things, I'll ask them, I'll say, would your sellers be interested in leaving their personal items behind, and the buyer will take care of it after closing? And the amount of listing agents say, oh, wow, they would do that, or oh, wow, yes, they would love that, or oh, wow, that's a great idea. Like that term by itself right there, that doesn't have a dollar value attached to it.
Mhm.
That's just a convenience factor. That's a, how do I make my offer stronger without having to offer more money? So that's an extremely important question to ask, is if they can leave all their personal, not all of them, but leave whatever
Just the stuff
personal
they don't
items
want,
behind.
right?
Exactly. It's going to be stuff that your buyer can literally go get a dumpster for and clean it out on the day after closing. And it's going to be super easy. It's usually it's just like big furniture. Honestly, they might even want to keep the furniture and use it themselves. So always ask. That's the point. And then after that, we've got terms, we've got closing date. We'll talk about inspections. So like I always am getting the buyers to try to understand that the easiest way to get beat in an offer right now is to leave the default everything in the contract, meaning we want to do 10 days for inspections. We want to do 10 days for negotiating inspections. And then we're going to go back and forth and figure out the repairs. If we know that we can look through a house and we're looking at the important items, we're looking at big ticket items together, we can confidently write an offer where in most cases, we don't have to negotiate repairs. They're comfortable with everything. They're looking at everything. I'm pointing out the most important things that they would need to look at that we can obviously see. And that's the key, is that if we can get the buyer comfortable to the point where we're writing offers as is, and in some cases, they don't even want to do the inspections. They're the only thing that they're really interested in is passing an occupancy inspection. We can make our terms extremely strong by taking out that clause. And so what we'll do there is, if they don't want to do inspections, the next thing I ask them is, how soon are you trying to move into this house? If they're not in a rush to move into the house and they can pass an occupancy inspection after the sale, that's a whole nother paragraph of our offer that we can potentially take out. And if they want to buy as is and they are willing to do an occupancy inspection after the fact, most of the time we're going to write on a special sales contract. And so this is extremely important and extremely competitive when you're going up against others on a house that are using a residential sales contract, because the buyer or the seller maybe said, I don't necessarily want to sell my house as is, but it's a huge benefit and a huge advantage if you're writing an offer and it comes in as is, because that wipes out inspections right there. That wipes out a ton of uncertainty for everyone that we're moving through and we're going to be accepting that offer. So I'll talk to them about those terms. If it's listed as an as-is sale, we're going to go in as is because that's the only option. But if it's not, I'm going to try to explain those benefits to the seller, to the listing agent. The reason that I'm taking time to break down my reasoning behind what we're going to do is because if I can make it easier for the listing agent to actually explain our offer and our terms to the seller, we have a huge leg up on anybody that just emailed over an offer and didn't explain anything to them. And so I'm trying to talk through all of those options. I'm explaining what we're going to be writing in our offer. And then I'm getting a read basically on, is this going to be enough to get our offer accepted? And you're easily able, you're going to tell, you'll be able to tell. And most of the time it's just as simple as, if money's the most important, you need to go in at the highest price possible. I really don't like messing with escalation clauses right now because our terms are drastically different, and they can be drastically different. If you put up 5 different offers, it's not the exact same terms on every single offer. So I don't always like the escalation clause. I'd rather go in, depending on what our numbers are looking at $15,000 over or $20,000 over, something along those lines. The next part that I love talking about with the listing agent, though, is the financing. Because if we've already done our homework, the buyer's already approved, the buyer has all of their paperwork into the lender. Literally, if the only thing that they need to do is order an appraisal, I'm going to tell the listing agent that. I'm going to say the buyer has all of their paperwork in with the lender. The lender will reach out and give you a call just to let you know they're solid, they're pre-approved. And the only thing that we need to do is order an appraiser to come out here and appraise the house. And that'll be ordered on a rush after you accept our offer. Like, those are really extremely proactive and aggressive things that you can talk about that as a listing agent, nobody's ever had those conversations with me. And so that's the other side that I look at, that is that if you're on the listing side and you have a buyer's agent, what is the best buyer's agent and the best offer going to tell you? That's what you need to be telling the listing agent when you're on the buy side. And so that's something that I've definitely been trying to focus in the last probably 6 to 12 months is if people aren't having these conversations with me and I'm the only one that is having this conversation with the listing agent when I'm on the buy side, that immediately right there, just that conversation alone can oftentimes be enough to actually put you over the edge or bump you from second to first just because you're extremely proactive in communicating. And then the other thing too is like, be first. If you have the ability and you see that the house is going on the market on Thursday or Friday, go see it Thursday or Friday. The worst thing that you can do, in my opinion, is if they say we're waiting to review an offer on Monday and you think you have until Sunday to go and see that house, you are 4 days behind.
Mm-hmm.
And in this market, that can drastically be the difference, because if you have something that if you have two offers on the table and say they're identical, say they're the exact same offer, nothing different, then the only difference is who put it in first and who put it in second. Most of the time, the person that puts it in first is going to be the one that they go with on that offer. So you've got to just, like, the way that I do it is I just break down literally every single move that I can make. How can I get beat? And that's what I'm explaining to the buyers as well. If we write with a certain term, this is how we get beat. We have two options. We either write it this way or we write it that way. And then I let them choose. I never am saying we have to write it this way. This is the only way we can write it. I'm giving them options and I'm explaining how we can get beat. And as long as they understand how we can get beat, they are typically the ones that are saying, okay, let's get more competitive on this option. And maybe say, for example, like earnest money, the difference between putting $5,000 earnest money down versus $5,000 non-refundable earnest money down. That's a huge difference. It means, like, no matter what happens, no matter what comes up, we are buying this house. And that's the seriousness behind getting a property under contract and not, is that if your buyer wants that house, you make little tweaks and you make little changes in order to get your offer accepted on the buy side. You have to be able to explain it. If you're not confident in what you're explaining and you're not confident in what works, number one, and what will beat you, number two, you've got to practice that somewhere. And if you don't know how to do it, figure that out. You have to figure that part of it out, because if you're not confident with these terms right now, that's an easy way to end up in third, fourth, fifth place.
So how are you doing that right now to, like, for giving non-refundable earnest money? How are you able to give them enough information for them to make an informed decision that, yes, let's move forward with non-refundable earnest money?
Absolutely, because the thing is with non-refundable, with earnest money in general, we could put down, we're putting $100,000 in earnest money. If we don't get that house, not a penny leaves your bank account. And so that's where it starts. That's why the most important question is, how bad do you want this house? Because if you just kind of want the house and that's not the house you really want, those terms aren't going to be anywhere near as aggressive. But if they say, yes, this is the house, we don't want to lose this house, we don't want to miss out on it, then we're writing extremely strong terms. And so this only works if you have a buyer that is really good with their financing. And this all goes back to how this conversation started. Go back to the basics, get their financing done ahead of time, because you are on the time clock when you go and show that property and when you need to get your offer in. And you need to do it as fast as possible. So if you're sitting there and you're not confident and your buyer's not confident that they can go and get financing because all their paperwork is in there, there's no chance in hell I'm going to do a non-refundable earnest money if the buyer isn't confident that they can get financing and the lender's not confident that they can get financing, or if they don't have all their paperwork in either. And so to me, it all goes back to that. If you know that the lender is going to get the job done on the financing side of the table, that's usually the biggest question mark that we specifically don't have control over, because we're not getting all those papers and we're not going through that loan process. So you've got to have a great lender right now. So that's step one. If they're good to go on the inspection part of it, and that's where we're spending time. Like, we're not just looking at the colors, we're not looking at the rooms, we're not looking at let's look at this house and decide if there's anything work-wise and work-related to it that's going to be a big ticket item that we need to actually fix and repair. And if you're not confident looking at a house and pointing out things of what they should be looking at, like we're looking at furnaces, air conditioners, water heaters. We're looking at plumbing systems. We're looking at electrical panels. Like, we're looking at all the boring stuff that nobody wants to go and look at. But that's because that's where the money is if there are issues when it comes time to repairs.
Right.
And so as long as we've looked at all of that, we've looked at the important parts that make a house, that's the confidence that you're helping them make the right decision and saying, yes, I'm willing to buy this as is. And the only thing that we need to do is like an occupancy inspection. And I'll point out stuff that would be on an occupancy inspection and things that might be like code violations that are little small things. But to me, everything in the house can be fixed. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters if you don't have a house to do it with. Yeah. Nothing matters. So you're just always going to be out there writing offers until you get a house. And so that's why my most important question to the buyer is, how bad do you want this house? Like, is this the house for you? Because if it is, we're going to write it in extremely strong and very direct ways. The other thing with the listing agents too, that you'll want to explain is, we're not looking for an out. We're not looking for a way out of the contract if we get accepted, which is why we would do non-refundable earnest money, which is why we would do, as is sales. This is why we would do not contingent on financing, but we might include an appraisal writer. Like, we're not looking for a way to get out of the contract if you accept us. And that's what you have to portray. So that's the conversation I have with both the buyer and the listing agent. I think that's the newest of my conversations, I'll say anyway, that I've not used in the past, that we are not looking for a way to get out of this contract if we get our offer accepted.
Yeah, I think that's huge, because I think that gives the seller some sort of little bit of peace of mind. And I think the other important thing is, right now, it's okay to let the listing agent know, like, show your buyer's hand. They really want this house. They love the house. Where in years past, it was kind of a little bit more like, there's a little more tact or negotiation to it. Right now, you have to show them that, hey, look, they really love this house. It's the perfect house for them. They're willing to do whatever they can to make the strongest offer possible to get the house, and then figure out those terms. So I think that first phone conversation, I like that you have it with your client, so they can be hearing it straight from first person as well. Like, you're hearing it from the listing agent. There's multiple offers. There's over asking. There's a ton of interest. They're hearing that, and it's not just you relaying it. I think that's super important. And then letting the listing agent know that we're prepared to make the strongest offer possible. What is your seller looking for? Aside from price, what else is important to your seller right now? Because how I mentioned before, so many people think a quick closing is always the answer. It's not. So are you doing anything from inspection perspective as well, if you're not waiving inspections? Shortening timeframes, I know you mentioned, but what about letting the seller know that you won't ask for anything under a certain price point as far as like a repair? Have you done anything like that?
So we've done those. The issue is those don't always work, because it just takes one person to say, we're not going to ask for anything. And then you lose on the inspections. Yeah. So to me, and this is where looking at the house and looking at the condition of the house and understanding things that are going to cost money on a house, that's extremely important right now. Because if you can say, I don't know, I'll say the electric panel, say you want to get a new electric panel. Well, a new electric panel might be $2,000, but you can literally just write that into the offer and say, we're not going to do inspections, but we want credits for a new electric panel of $2,000. Boom, done. We're not going to ask for anything else. Like, that's an option. Or like what you just said, we're not going to ask for things that are over a certain dollar amount, say $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, $2,500, whatever dollar amount that you come up with. The issue is that, again, if you're going up against one clean offer that says, I don't care about inspections other than the occupancy, or I'm willing to take on everything, you immediately bump from first to second. Yeah. And that's the difference between getting the house and not getting the house. So that's the conversation that I'll have with the buyer. I'll say, we have two options. We even multiple options with your inspections, but if we write it this way, this is how we get beat. Are you okay with that? Or are you willing to take on not asking for anything and basically saying, we're going to buy the house as it sits? Now, the other thing that you can do is you can still include the ability to terminate the contract, which means I either am okay with the inspections the way that they are, or if I'm not, we're going to terminate the contract, but we're not going to go back and ask the seller to fix things. Now, this brings up an interesting scenario if you write it that way, because most of the time, if you were the best offer on the table, it means the seller's getting the most amount of money. They don't want to lose your offer. So they might be willing to take care of something or some things or offer a little bit of a credit that of what came back on the inspection. Because if you wrote an offer and it's $40,000 over and we're asking for $4,000 in credits, chances are a reasonable seller and a reasonable listing agent are going to keep that deal together. And the listing agent's going to explain to them, like, this is all it's going to take to keep the deal together, offer the credit. Now we're moving forward.
Yeah.
So those two scenarios, I don't particularly like the we're not going to ask for anything unless it's over a certain amount. I'll use the either completely as is, we're not going to ask for anything, or we're going to go in as is and keep our ability to terminate the contract, and then use the termination of the contract as another negotiating tool, especially because if we're the best offer and we've offered the most amount of money and the sellers weren't expecting to get that much money for the house, they're going to be willing to credit some back to take care of a few things.
Cool. I like that. I like that a lot. So it's all about educating your buyer, having a good conversation with the listing agent to find out what's important to the seller, figuring out how many offers potentially are out there over asking, to figure out how we can make, because it's not always price, it's about terms too. So how can we set the best terms forward to get the offer accepted? What are you doing right now for FHA and VA? So we know that FHA competing against the cash offer is challenging, right? So how can you set, for people that are working with FHA buyers right now, how can they set up their FHA or VA buyers to perform best?
Absolutely. So what I've found in the past is this comes from like lenders that we've not used on a regular basis. A lot of banks also will just give buyers FHA pre-approvals. And whether that's because they make more money on them or it's easier to get them approved and through as FHA, I don't know the reason why. But I do know that some buyers who are approved FHA can also qualify for a conventional loan. So that's the first step. Get back on the same page with the lender, see if your FHA buyer can get approved for a conventional loan, or what they would need to do in order to be approved for a conventional loan. And if their debt to income is too high or their credit score is too low and there's literally no possible way of doing it, of getting them to conventional, then you have to focus on what we're going to talk about now. Mm-hmm. So with FHA, the biggest, I'll say, kind of issue is, well, there's two: appraisals and inspections. So let's talk about inspections first. So with inspections, your FHA writer has the checkbox that says, I choose to do an inspection, I do not choose to do an inspection. The easiest way to make your offer stand out is to check the box where it says, I do not choose to do my own inspection. So that's basically writing an as-is offer as an FHA buyer, which you can absolutely do. Now, the second thing that's extremely important, especially with the government-based loans, is they are still going to send their own inspector out to the property to make sure that the property is eligible for an FHA loan. What that means is, like, the most common things that we talk about usually are like chipped paint or broken windows, or trip and fall hazards, things of those natures. So whatever comes back on that FHA inspection, the best offers that I've seen from FHA buyers are the ones that say that the buyer is willing to pay for the repairs that are required by the FHA inspections. So your seller does not have to pay for them. The buyer will take those on. And that was something I never really understood until recently, because I always thought, like, oh, well, if the FHA inspector says this isn't eligible for FHA, we're done. We're done right there. And that is not the case. Right. You can do the inspection items to get the FHA loan, and the buyer can pay for those items to be done in order for them to get the FHA loan. So that right there is extremely, extremely powerful, because that is usually one of the things that we know, unfortunately, is a downside to FHA, is that their inspections are required in order to get that loan, can sometimes be very picky, and most of the time are just tedious and a pain. So if you've got the buyer that is willing to take on those repairs, that's the number one thing that you can do. And then obviously the appraisal is the next part of it as well. So if you're up against a cash buyer, let's just say the purchase price is $300. Purchase price is $300. You're up against a cash buyer. What you need to do on FHA is go up to the maximum amount that your buyer is willing to spend on their monthly payment. And you can include the appraisal still in there. That appraisal will come back, and if it doesn't appraise, to have the ability to negotiate on price. But what you have to do is create enough room and distance between your FHA offer on price and the next closest offer, whether that's conventional or whether that's cash. And that might be 30,000, that might be 35,000 over what that price is. But the difference is that if you keep losing on FHA, the only thing that's going to get people to pay attention is a drastically different price for that property that you're offering it on. And that's how you beat cash, and that's how you beat conventional, because the seller has the potential to make more money on the sale of their property by going with your offer. You've already taken care of the inspections. You're going to take care of anything that comes up, buying it as is, pay for anything that's needed to close the loan. Now, the next step is where the appraisal and the price comes in. So go up to the maximum price that they're willing to pay. And that needs to be talked about on a monthly payment, not on like what the list price or the purchase price is. Because if they're comfortable with the monthly payment, then that's really the only thing that matters. And we're especially seeing this with FHA buyers on duplexes that want to buy as an owner occupied, live in one unit and rent the other unit out. That's an option for your FHA buyers. They can still put 3.5% down to buy an investment property, to buy their first investment property. And that's incredible, because if you have someone that's already bought their first property and they live in their primary, they need to come to the table potentially with 20 or 25% down in order to buy an investment property. So if you've not had that conversation on the benefits of using FHA to buy an investment property, now they're willing to pay a little bit more because they know that they've got somebody on the other side that's helping them pay down their loan and pay down their monthly payment on their mortgage. So that would be the other thing that I would look at, is that price alone, and then the inspections for FHA buyers. Didn't
that just happen recently with an FHA on a duplex where they came in considerably higher than a conventional or cash?
We did. They came in $20,000. So the conventional offer was $15,000 over the asking price. The FHA loan was $36,000 over the asking price. And so that's what I mean by distance between you and the next closest offer. So that was a distance of $21,000 basically. And they talked about how they would take care of any of the inspection items that came back that FHA was requiring to be done in order for them to close on the loan. So that $20,000 difference was enough for the seller to say, you know what, I am comfortable with this. We'll take the FHA loan. And now basically the only thing we're waiting on is the appraisal for it to see if they made the right decision or not.
Yeah.
But the thing there is that they created enough distance for the seller to accept their offer. And if they hadn't done that, we wouldn't know either way, and the appraisal wouldn't be important. So the important thing is get the offer accepted.
Yeah, I like it. So good. So I like that you touched on, just kind of recap, talked on the buyer consultation, the importance of it, how to educate your buyers for the market that we're in right now. Then showing the property, having the conversation with the realtor to figure out what's important to the seller, have that conversation in front of the client as well so they can hear it firsthand. Now you submit your offer, you put your offer together and talk and give your clients examples or give them scenarios on how to prepare the best offer and give suggestions and value from a standpoint of they make the decision, but you're giving them the guidance or the information. Now, when you submit the offer to the seller, are you just emailing it and shooting a text? What's going on there?
Absolutely not. That's the easiest way to be ignored and for no one to read your offer or pay attention to you. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call them again and say, hey, I'm sending you over my offer. And that puts it on the radar that we're sending over the offer. Then the offer gets emailed. Then I'm following up and I'm asking them in the email, let's rewind there. So in the email that I'm sending, I'm not just like attaching a PDF document, like we use dot loops. I'm not attaching a PDF document, dot loop, and then just sending a dot loop email with a PDF attached. Completely pointless. What you need to do is take your PDF document, start typing up an email, and you need to pull out all of the most important parts of your email, of your offer, I should say, and type it line by line, the highlights of your offer in that email. You want to think of it from the perspective of, if this agent doesn't even open my PDF document of the offer, they can read my email and they can read the highlights and they can read the terms and they'll know exactly what's in that offer. Because what will they do? They are going to literally take your email and explain your offer based off the email that has been written. And so you need to point out the important parts. You need to point out what makes you stand out, what makes you different, what makes it an advantage. Definitely relay the fact that this is going to be a very smooth transaction. This is going to be a really easy transaction for your sellers. We're looking forward to seeing you at the closing table. The buyers don't want really any way of trying to get out of their contract, depending on how you're writing it. Like what you said in the beginning, like you're not trying to hold back. Nothing's going to be a secret.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that's going to be a secret, because if you've got 10 people that want the house, the person that's keeping secrets is like, oh, well, we're going to try to be strategic. We're trying to negotiate. Like there's that person. And then there's the person that says, we want this house. What's it going to take to get it? We want your house. And we really want your house.
Mm-hmm.
We really, really, really want your house. That person's going to win.
Yeah.
And so you need to be that person. You need to be that buyer's agent. You need to be that buyer, because that immediately then separates you. The way you should always think about it too is like there's two piles. There's always going to be a good pile of offers and a bad pile of offers. And right now, especially, you need to be in the top 3 every single time. And if you're not consistently in the top 3, you need to talk more with the listing agent. What could we have done to make our offer stand out? What could we have done differently to make us a stronger offer? And you can even ask that after you submit it. Is there anything that we can do to make this a stronger offer for your sellers? And they might tell you, they might not, but if you don't ask the question, you never know. And the other thing is, like, after you send that email and you've typed up all of your highlights, like I'm calling them, I'm emailing them, and I'm texting them. And it's until I get a response back that they've seen it, they've reviewed it, they understand it, and we're talking about it in some cases as well too, especially if I'm catching them on the phone. I'll just see if they have 5 minutes to go over the quick highlights of the offer, see if they have any questions on it. So communicate, and over communicate. Don't just send and kind of sit back, because chances are very good either A, you're not going to get a response, and B, you're not going to get the house.
Well, a lot of times realtors won't even see it. So if you just send an email,
Right,
and hope they see it, they might miss it, especially if they have 10 offers that come in. So the phone call is extremely important. So you're making the phone call, you're kind of giving them the highlights of the offer, you're recapping all that in an email as well, and then sending the text if necessary if they didn't answer. But you're doing whatever you have to be able to communicate with them that they received your offer, that they understand it, that you can explain it, and then explain how important it is that your buyer gets the house. I like that. Anything else then? Like, let's just say you submit, and I like what you said too about be first. Don't just think that, okay, the house hit the market today on Friday, we have until Monday. If a good enough offer comes in, that seller could accept it. They might see a great, the first offer might be fantastic, and they say, you know what, I don't want 100 people through my house this weekend. Let's just take this offer. We probably won't get any better. It's over asking, it's got all the terms we want. So don't assume, to your point, that you have until Monday to submit. Get your offer in right away.
and that's on both sides. Yeah, and just because they're having an open house on a Sunday, like just last weekend, we had a listing went live, I think on Thursday. We saw it, we put our offer in, they made their decision on Saturday. They canceled the open house. Like that still is happening, because in most cases, this is the way that I look at it. If you've got an excellent offer on the table, and it has to be excellent. This can't be a 5,000 over or a 10,000 over and expect them to cancel an open house, especially if you've got 3 or 4 offers that are $10,000 over, which for some reason, like that seems to be the number that like people like to write it at. That's not strong enough. So you have to go in at a price. That's why I also don't like the escalation clauses, because the escalation clause is dependent on another offer coming in. And it's just as easy to go for them to raise the price and their offer than it is for you. Whereas if you go straight in and you're $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 over in order to get the property accepted, like that's going to be a really hard offer to beat. And if you can put that on the table and make them think like, yeah, this is good enough, like chances are we're probably not going to get anything better, that's where you get the sellers accepting things before the review period on Monday or before the open house, stuff like that. You don't know until you send it. And that's the key, is that you have to be first. The other thing is that if you're in a situation where, say it goes live on Thursday, you go see it Thursday, you write your offer and you're submitted, and they want to review offers on Monday, and there's no way around it. That's the only thing they're doing. They're not going to make any decisions. That's fine. What you need to do is every single day, you need to follow up with the listing agent and say, hey, I'm following up about our offer. Have you received any other offers? Are we in good shape with our offer? Like, are we on the top of the pile with our offer? Like, is there anything that we should think about differently? And if the answer is no, then go to the Saturday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You're calling them literally every single day just to check in and see where the offer is. Because that's something that you can do very proactively that keeps you top of mind, and it shows like the enthusiasm. It shows you want the house. That's what I do. Is if I'm stuck until Monday on them making a decision, I'm talking to that agent the 3 days prior leading up to them reviewing.
That's huge. I think that's a big miss for a lot of people, is they just submit, even if they do call. A lot of people don't call, they just submit.
Right.
If they do call, it's one time, and then they pray that on Monday, or it sounds like you're being proactive every single day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, reaching out to this realtor, asking questions, seeing if more offers came in. Is there anything we needed to make our offer stronger? You're staying, like to your point, you're staying top of mind with that realtor.
Mm-hmm.
So I think so. Have you had situations where you haven't been the strongest offer, but you've maybe been the most proactive and you've gotten it accepted?
Yes, because we've actually been in situations where we were up against escalation clauses, and basically the conversation turned into, there was 5 or 6 offers on the table, and then it was us and one other offer. Technically, like, their escalation clause would beat our offer price and what we were willing to go up to, because we also had an escalation clause in there. And I said, let's look at this from a different perspective. Like, what is the number that your seller wants? Like, what is the number? And it's a very direct question. Like, what's the number? Tell them to name the number and the price, and we will rewrite the offer without the escalation clause. We'll give them that number. One of the important things for them was like the appraisal and not appraising, because it was getting to a situation where like the escalation clauses were cool and all, but there was no chance in hell that house is going to appraise for what the escalation clauses were going up to. And so I said, what if we do this? What if we take out our escalation clause, and we take out our appraisal writer? We give you the number that your seller wants, and that's the number that they're getting on the sale. They don't have to care anything about an appraisal. They don't have to care anything, because we were going back and forth with like appraisal gaps and all that too. They don't have to care about an appraisal gap. We don't have to care about paying a difference. Like, what is the number? What is the price? And she just straight up said, she said, let me talk to the seller and see what they say. And they came back. She said, if you give us this number for this price on the house, and you take out the escalation clause and you take out the appraisal writer, and like that's the purchase price, and that's what the seller is going to be walking away with, that's what it took. And so we rewrote it. We gave him the number and got the house.
Nice. I like it. Yeah, that's awesome.
But it all comes from conversation.
Exactly.
Like, we could have sat back and just let the escalation clauses play out, not changed anything. But you have to have conversations with listing agents right now. And I think the important thing too, that a lot of listing agents miss, is that they say, oh, well, I can't disclose the price of whatever the other offers are. And the reality is they can. They have to go and talk to the seller. If the seller says, yeah, that's fine, you can disclose it, which most sellers, if you're trying to get more money for your sellers, like, that's the right thing to do. They say, hey, this is the price, these are the prices, this is the price that it takes in order for us to get the house and for them to be happy with. Like, have those conversations. I've never, like, in the last 6 months, those conversations I've been having them more frequently than any other years past, because it is a situation where if the seller has a number and they get their number, why do you need 10 other offers? You need one. Yeah. You need one offer with that number on it with great terms. And if you're waiving the appraisal rider, that solidifies them getting the actual house at that price. Now you're done. Everybody's moving to closing. It doesn't matter if you have 10 or 20 or 50. They just need one good offer with everything that they want on it. And it's your job to figure it out. And most of the time, like, you're going to get an agent, usually the listing agent is going to be on the defensive, the first call, the second call, maybe the third call, maybe the whole entire time. But the more that you can talk to them and say, we want to make this a win for your seller, and make it about the seller. Don't make it about your buyer anymore. We want to make this a win for your seller. What exactly do you want to see? What is the price? What's their number? We'll give them basically all the terms, give them the closing date, give them everything you want. That's how you win right now, is give the seller what they want, within reason, of course. But if you're in a situation where you feel like you're competing and it's just price, you have to call the listing agent. Like, there's no way of getting around that right now.
I agree. So that's a lot of good information. And it sounds like the biggest thing is just, you're proactive. You're proactive with communicating with the listing agent. You're proactive with communicating with your buyers to educate them on the market. You're proactive with staying in touch with the agent after the offer's been submitted. And because of that, you're starting to win, you're winning more deals.
Right.
than losing. So I think that's a big tip. Any other tips you have before we kind of wrap up here? You've given a lot of great information. You've given a lot of good steps that people can put into practice right now to help them start winning for their buyers. And I think the biggest one, though, is it starts in the beginning. It starts with having that good buyer consultation to educate your buyers on the market that we're in right now.
My biggest tip is that, like, don't take the template of what the residential sale contract offer and all of those default numbers on there are. Like, I'm talking like the 10 days inspections, 10 days to negotiate, like what 3 days earnest money, like make that 1 day, make it tomorrow. Like you should be changing everything, and you should change it for the better. Because if you look at things from the perspective of how do I get beat, and you answer that question yourself, figure out how to change it so that you don't get beat, or you make it so you're harder to get beat, and within reason and talking to the buyer. But don't just send the defaults on the contracts, because that's how you end up not even in the top 3 right now.
Yeah, I agree. Love it. So yeah, it's a skill-based market working with buyers right now. You've got to keep sharpening your skill set. Hope you guys got value out of this. Geoff, thank you so much. There's a lot of great information. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Thanks. See you.
Bye.